You don't see it coming. There's no siren, no wall of water, no shaking ground. The sky looks beautiful, the sun is bright, and then people start dying. In August of 2003, Europe experienced what researchers would later describe as the most lethal natural disaster the continent had seen in over 50 years. Temperatures across France, Spain, Italy, and Portugal climbed past 104 degrees Fahrenheit, that's 40 degrees Celsius, and stayed there for more than a week straight. Rivers dropped to record lows. Crops died in fields. Power grids buckled under the demand of millions of air conditioners running at full blast. And in apartments, nursing homes, and hospital wards all across the continent, tens of thousands of people quietly stopped breathing. By the time the air finally cooled, an estimated 70,000 people were dead. Not from a hurricane, not from a flood, not from an earthquake. From heat. And almost nobody outside of Europe even noticed. This is the story of the deadliest natural disaster that barely makes the news, and why your body is far more fragile in extreme heat than you've ever been told. Here's what makes heat waves so fundamentally different from every other natural disaster. When a hurricane hits, the cameras are there. When an earthquake strikes, buildings collapse on live television. When a tsunami rolls in, someone is filming it from a rooftop. But when a heat wave kills 70,000 people, nothing happens. There's no footage, no dramatic moment, no collapsed structure, just silence. People dying alone in their apartments, while the rest of the world watches something else. And that silence is exactly what makes heat so dangerous. Your body is at its core a machine that runs on a very narrow temperature band. Your internal temperature hovers around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, 37 degrees Celsius. That number isn't random. It's the sweet spot where your enzymes work, your neurons fire, your heart beats in rhythm, and your blood carries oxygen to every cell you have. Drift even a few degrees above that to 104 to 106, and the machinery starts to break down. Proteins unfold. Cell membranes lose their structure. Your brain, which is the most temperature-sensitive organ in your body, begins to misfire. This is what doctors call hyperthermia. And it doesn't kill you the way you probably imagine. The common assumption is that you just get really hot, pass out, and die. That's not how it works. What actually happens is a chain reaction that unfolds in stages, and each stage gives you a warning that most people either don't recognize or can't escape. The first stage is what physiologists call the compensatory phase. Your body detects the rising heat and activates its primary cooling system, sweating. Your sweat glands pump moisture onto the surface of your skin. As that moisture evaporates, it pulls heat away from your body. It's the same principle behind a wet towel on your forehead. It works remarkably well as long as two conditions are met. Condition 1, the air around you is dry enough for the sweat to actually evaporate. Condition 2, you have enough water in your body to keep producing sweat. When both conditions hold, you can survive astonishingly high temperatures. Desert cultures have lived in 120-degree heat for thousands of years, and they did it by staying hydrated, staying in shade, and wearing loose clothing that traps a thin layer of cooler air against the skin. But here's the problem. When humidity rises, when the air is already saturated with moisture, sweat can't evaporate. It just sits on your skin, dripping uselessly. Your body keeps pumping out more and more fluid, your heart rate climbs as it tries to push blood to the surface of your skin for cooling, but the heat has nowhere to go. You are, in the most literal sense, cooking from the inside. Scientists measure this danger using something called the wet bulb temperature. A wet bulb thermometer is wrapped in a damp cloth, and it measures the lowest temperature that evaporation can cool something down to. When the wet bulb temperature reaches 95 degrees Fahrenheit, 35 degrees Celsius, the human body can no longer cool itself through sweating under any circumstances. You could be naked, standing in front of a fan, drinking infinite water, and it wouldn't matter. The physics simply stops working. In 2003, parts of southern France came dangerously close to that threshold. And this is where the story gets personal. This is where it stops being about weather data and starts being about what happens inside a human body when the cooling system fails. When your core temperature climbs past 104 degrees Fahrenheit, your body shifts into crisis mode. Your heart rate surges past 120 beats per minute. Your blood pressure drops because your blood vessels have dilated wide open trying to release heat. Your brain, starved of proper blood flow and overheating, begins to produce confusion, disorientation, and a dangerous cognitive fog. You stop thinking clearly. You stop making rational decisions. You might forget to drink water. You might not realize how hot you actually are. You might lie down on a bed thinking you just need to rest and never get back up. This is the second stage, heat exhaustion. And if you don't cool down, if nobody finds you, if the temperature doesn't drop, if you're elderly or isolated or living alone, your body crosses a threshold that there is no coming back from. The third stage is heat stroke, and heat stroke is not a more intense version of being hot. It is a systemic collapse. Your core temperature passes 106 degrees Fahrenheit. Your hypothalamus, the tiny region at the base of your brain that regulates body temperature, loses control entirely. Your cells begin to break down. Your kidneys, overwhelmed by the chemical cascade of destroyed muscle tissue, a process called rhabdomyolysis, which is just a medical term for your muscles literally dissolving into your bloodstream, start to fail. Your liver fails next. Your blood begins to clot inside your vessels in a cascading failure called disseminated intravascular coagulation. Your brain swells inside your skull, and within hours, sometimes minutes, multiple organ systems shut down simultaneously. This is what killed most of the 70,000 people in Europe in 2003. But the deaths weren't random, and this is the part of the story that makes it truly devastating. In the city of Paris alone, an estimated 14,800 people died during those 2 weeks in August. The French National Statistics Office, known as INSCE, documented the spike in death rates that appeared almost overnight. Mortuaries overflowed. Refrigerated trucks were brought in to store bodies because there was simply no more room. The French government was on summer vacation. President Jacques Chirac was in Canada. The Prime Minister was on holiday, and for the first critical days, there was almost no official response at all. When researchers later studied exactly who died, the picture was hauntingly clear. The vast majority were elderly, over 75 years old, living alone, in small apartments on upper floors with no air conditioning. Many of them were on medications, diuretics, beta blockers, antipsychotics, that interfere with the body's ability to sweat, dilate blood vessels, or even feel thirst. They didn't know they were in danger, and nobody checked on them. A sociologist named Eric Kleinenberg at New York University had actually predicted this exact pattern years earlier. In his landmark study of the 1995 Chicago heat wave, which killed 739 people in a single week, Kleinenberg documented what he called social autopsies, examining not just how people died, but why they died where they died. He found that the neighborhoods with the highest death rates weren't the hottest ones. They were the most socially isolated ones. Places where elderly residents were afraid to leave their apartments, where neighbors didn't know each other. Where the social fabric had been torn apart by poverty, crime, and decades of neglect. Heat doesn't just kill bodies. It kills people who have been abandoned by the systems that were supposed to protect them. And the terrifying truth is that this isn't history. This is the future. A landmark study published in The Lancet in 2021, led by a research team that analyzed global temperature-related mortality across 43 countries, found that heat-related deaths have been increasing steadily since 2000. The researchers estimated that over 356,000 deaths per year are now linked to excessive heat, and that number is climbing as global temperatures continue to rise. Climate researcher Christy Ebi at the University of Washington, who has spent decades studying the health impacts of climate change, has warned repeatedly that most of the world's cities are not prepared for what is coming. Air conditioning, she points out, works brilliantly for those who have it. But the people who don't have it, the elderly poor, outdoor workers, people experiencing homelessness, entire communities in countries without reliable power grids, are the ones who will die first. And they will die quietly. In 2022, India and Pakistan endured a heat wave that pushed temperatures past 120 degrees Fahrenheit, 49 degrees Celsius, for weeks. Crops failed across the Indus River basin. Glaciers in the Hindu Kush melted at record rates. Rivers flooded with glacial runoff. And the death toll, while difficult to count precisely in rural regions with limited infrastructure, was estimated in the thousands. The United Nations has called extreme heat the silent killer of climate change. And the reason it's silent is the same reason it was silent in Paris in 2003. There's no footage to film, no dramatic collapse, no building falling, just rooms getting hotter, bodies working harder, and eventually, quietly, systems shutting down one by one. But here's what most people miss. You don't need a global catastrophe to die from heat. You just need one bad afternoon. Every year in the United States, more people die from heat than from tornadoes, hurricanes, floods, and lightning combined. That's not a projection. That's a statistic from the National Weather Service. And most of those deaths happen in exactly the way the 2003 deaths happened, alone indoors, without air conditioning, without anyone checking in. A working-age adult mowing a lawn in 98-degree heat with high humidity can go from perfectly fine to full heat stroke in under 45 minutes. A toddler left in a car, even on a day that only reaches 80 degrees outside, can die in under an hour because the temperature inside a closed vehicle climbs to 130 degrees Fahrenheit in minutes. An elderly person sitting in a second-floor apartment with the windows closed, and no fan can drift into confusion and unconsciousness without ever realizing they were in danger. The cruelest thing about heat is that it disables the very mechanism your brain uses to recognize it. As your core temperature rises, your cognitive function degrades. You become confused. Your judgment deteriorates. You stop sweating not because your body has recovered, but because it has run out of fluid. And in that fog, you make the decisions that kill you. You lie down instead of calling for help. You stop drinking because you don't feel thirsty anymore. You close the window because the hot air outside feels worse than the trapped air inside. There is a reason that every major disaster relief agency now considers extreme heat to be the #1 weather-related killer on the planet. There is a reason that cities like Phoenix, Miami, Athens, and New Delhi are investing millions in early warning systems, cooling centers, and public health infrastructure specifically designed for heat events. There is a reason that researchers like Kleinenberg, Ebi, and the team behind the Lancet's global mortality study keep sounding the alarm. Because the next time the temperature climbs past 104 and stays there, in your city, in your neighborhood, in your apartment, the question isn't whether your body can handle it. The question is whether anyone will notice before it's too late. The sky will look beautiful that day, the sun will be bright, there won't be a siren, there won't be a wall of water, there won't be shaking ground. Just heat and silence, and then maybe you.